everybody? Welcome to the Ultimate Insider Podcast here on Bear Insider. I'm Mike Pawlawski, former Cal Hall of Fame quarterback and 11-year pro. Today, we're going to head south. We're going to check out the rest of the conference because I've been telling you that I was going to do it. We're going to talk about players, coaches, teams, predictions, maybe where we expect teams to fall in the rankings. I want you guys to remember, if you really want to get nitty-gritty, kind of the granular on football, you can always check out my YouTube channel where I talk about X's and O's, coverages, schemes, teams, coaches, players, all that stuff at Elite Athletes TV on YouTube. And you can check me out there to get the down and dirty on football. But if you want to talk Cal football, this is the place, Bear Insider, Ultimate Insider. Now, let's get to our preview. Well, I've been promising you that we're going to do the Pac-12 South preview. Here it is, right before game week. And actually, we've got a little cheat sheet going because we got to see UCLA play early. But once again, editor, senior writer Jim McGill joining me. We're going to talk about Pac-12 South, and we're going to kick it off way south, start as far south as we go in the Pac-12 because there's the least to talk about down there. But Jim, welcome to the show, and let's kick it off with the Cats. I mean, what are they going to look like this year down at University of Arizona?
I think they made a good hire in Jed Fish, but boy, they don't have a lot to work with right now. They're recruiting better than they have in the past, but it takes a while for that to filter in. They weren't very good on offense. They weren't very good on defense. Their best piece, Gunnell, their quarterback, transferred out. So I'd expect a pretty rough transition for Fish with Arizona this year. And I'd have to think they're probably going to be at about the bottom of the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, and I mean, you come off of that loss, right? 70-7.
Brutal.
To your rival, Arizona State. And, that just sealed someone's fate. Not that people weren't, the war drums weren't, sounding before that. But you kind of seal your fate with that loss. The team comes off of that. A bunch of transfers out, right? You nailed it. Gunnell's out. He was actually, I thought he looked pretty good on film last year.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
And all of a sudden now you're kind of left with whatever you have. And so it's going to be a rebuilding process in Tucson. I think a lot of teams are looking at that game on their schedule and they think, we'll check that one off in the proverbial win column. Although you can never, any game in the Pac-12, you can be in trouble. But I think a lot of teams are looking at that as a win for them coming up down with the Cats this year.
Yeah, one thing they do have is their running back Broussard's probably one of the better returning running backs in the league. It's always good to have a good running back in your stable. And receivers aren't too bad. Stanley and Jerry Rice's son, they're pretty solid too. But they're going to have the blocking. They're going to have the QB to get them the ball too. I just don't expect much from them this year. Yeah,
and a new offensive coordinator, right? Jeb Fish is an offensive guy, so new offensive coordinator, changing up the offense, new quarterback. Like there's a whole bunch of reasons why Arizona shouldn't be really good this year. You talked about Broussard, and since we're on that name, let's talk about the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year last year up in Colorado, right? There's a Pac-12 South team up in Colorado. Really good. Carl Durrell comes in last year. He has his team played a 4-2, competing for the Pac-12 South championship, playing at a high level. And they have a guy who comes out of nowhere. Broussard has had 2 ACL injuries, and they never expected him to do much. He's a little mighty mite out there on the field, but he almost averages 150 yards per game running the ball for Colorado last year.
You know what? You got me on that one. He wasn't Arizona. He's Colorado, so Arizona even has less. You're right. Broussard is a big piece of the puzzle for Colorado. They're another one, though, that I expect to be kind of towards the lower of the Pac-12 South. I think we're hitting on the lowest 2 right away. Broussard is their main piece of the puzzle for the Buffs, but I'm actually a little bit surprised that Durrell did as well as he did this year. Nobody was very impressed with him at UCLA. It'll be interesting to see what he might be able to build there.
Well, so offensively, they're going to run the ball again, right? So they've got 4 of the 5 offensive linemen coming back. And Carl Durrell's an offensive guy. What he said in the offseason is he wasn't able to put in his entire system last year. They came in, it was COVID. It was another one of those things where you're coming in, you're trying to install. He was late, right? They didn't even practice because they were in a hotel until October.
Sounds familiar with Cal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so didn't have a lot of kind of continuity or any kind of efficiency in that program last year. Well, now Durrell has had an off season, right? He's been able to work with his guys, install his system, put in the motions, formations, all those things that are going to help him in that West Coast style of offense. Got a great returning back in Broussard. They get their other running back who was injured the year before, actually led the team in rushing in 2019. And so they're going to be pretty good running the ball up front, big guys coming back. But last year, their quarterback, Sam Neuer, who was another guy who came out of nowhere, right? He was a safety. He was a special teams player. He was all those things. They asked him to come back and play quarterback. Well, he transfers out. He didn't finish the season as strong as he started.
Yeah.
But he transfers out now, right? He's up at Oregon State.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have a new trigger man.
Tough loss. And I don't know what Schroot's going to do. I mean, he was pretty highly touted coming into Tennessee. Didn't really do that much there. He was a Cal recruit, so Cal fans are going to be familiar with him. I don't know. I wouldn't expect a whole lot from Schrute at Colorado, honestly.
Who knows what to expect. Receiver, they're okay. They're okay at receiver. They're going to have to run the football. So you're going to see a lot of play action, right? Kind of picture David Shaw gone east into Colorado, because Calderell runs that same system. He's running that West Coast system. So look for tight ends, look for running the football, look for play action on that offensive side of the ball. Defensively for Colorado, a huge piece of it, Nate Landman, right? He is a stud. He's a local product, Monte Vista kid. Not sure how
forever. Another one of those guys that's been playing forever.
Right. And I'm not sure how we let him get to Colorado, right? How did
they offered him too late? That was the problem.
Yeah. But he's a fantastic football player. You watch him on film, he does everything, right? That middle linebacker spot, super solid, great football player. Yeah. And so he comes back. If that Achilles heals up, and if he can keep it healed up, anytime you have an injury like that, you're constantly fighting with tendonitis. And so if he can keep that healed up, if he can play at the same level that he played at before the Achilles, he's a big special piece of that defensive backfield in terms of that linebacker spot. Their secondary last year, I thought, was kind of suspect, quite honestly. When I watched them, they got Blackman got a lot of love, like he was a high recruit, but I didn't think he played very highly. And I think teams actually started picking on him towards the end. So Colorado's secondary, a little rough. They're going to have to find some pass rush. As with any team that is not notorious for being a monstrous pass rush team, you got to find pass rush. You got to manufacture it somewhere. And so if Landman's healthy, he definitely takes that defense up a notch. Secondary, hopefully they grow in a year. But I expect Colorado to be about where they're predicted in that Pac-12 South, which is right near the bottom.
Yeah, probably fifth or so, I would say is about right.
Okay. You notice we're kind of staying out of the LA area. I think we're going to come into that LA basin a little bit later, but let's talk about Utah, because Utah is kind of interesting and intriguing at the same time with all the transfers that have come into Utah this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were set for a rough situation with the running game, with the tragedy with Ty Jordan passing away. But man, talk about salvaging that with a couple of big transfers coming in. That's huge for Utah. I mean, they've always got the D. The D is typically one of the best in the league consistently under Whittingham, but without a running game, it was going to be pretty rough, especially with Bentley out. Interesting though, you got Brewer coming in from Baylor, so that could be a pretty good transition too.
Right. So that whole offensive backfield, right? You get it's TJ Pledger out of Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma recruits great backs. And then you have Chris Curry out of LSU. So 2 4-star guys, big time recruits. If you are a good running back, you may not get playing time at those 2 systems, but there may be space for you at Utah. They've been focused around a running back with that offensive system for the last several years. They need to have a guy to carry the rock. Those 2 guys may fill that gap for them at the position. And you talked about it. You get the Baylor transfer coming in at quarterback. A guy, so let's look at his total yards, 9,700 yards and 65 touchdowns at Baylor.
Wow.
Right. So he comes in, it's Charlie Brewer, has experience. You have to imagine this guy steps on the field and starts doing what he did at Baylor with success at Utah. And it's a kind of quarterback that Kyle Whittingham likes, right? Or hates, I should say. Defensive coordinators hate mobile guys. They hate the guys that can run around, kind of stretch defenses, make stuff happen. Charlie Brewer can be mobile. He can get out of the pocket, but also, as you look at his stats, the guy can sling it too.
Yeah, and he's got Britton Covey to throw to, their best receiver back. So that'll.
I love Covey. Britton Covey is awesome. Like another little mighty mite, right? Just a little guy, but he just kept going. I talked to Troy Taylor, who coached him when he was there. He's like, man, this guy just keeps getting hurt, but he just keeps playing. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He just plays through every injury, toughness, just a great football player.
That's what coaches love to see for sure.
Yeah, no
They're always
doubt.
going to be dinged up in college football. That's just the way it is.
And especially when you weigh like 137 pounds,
Yeah.
right? You're always going to get whacked in college football.
Yeah.
Defensively, right? That's where this team lives. It's all about the grind and defense, and we talk about that all the time. This team lives on defense because Kyle Whittingham is a defensive guy. Let's talk about that defensive side of the ball for Utah. They bring all their linebackers back, right? Studs coming back. In terms of starts, they have their three main linebackers coming back in that middle. Plus, they bring back almost their entire secondary, guys who played well for them in that Kyle Whittingham system, guys who were extremely successful. And you know that's where they're going to focus on defense.
Yeah, they led the league in scoring defense, which is ultimately where it's at. They gave up a decent amount of yards through the passing game, but they didn't let teams in the end zone for the most part. So that's what counts.
And that's it in ball hawking, right? Getting that ball back, something they do, something they teach. But a huge part of that is always defensive line, right? And Utah, they have some stars come through that defensive line, but they always reload. They've always got those big guys, push the
poly
pocket.
Guys. Yeah,
exactly. They get the poly guys that make the quarterback feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they find a way to push that pocket. Plus, they manufacture pressures, right? They'll bring linebackers, they'll bring DBs, they'll give you different looks, and they'll kind of hit you when you're not expecting it because Kyle's really good on that defensive side of the ball. And so I think that's huge for Utah. They're always in the picture in terms of kind of challenging because they play great defense, but they always seem to find a way to screw it up. I always make the mistake every single time I watch a couple of Utah games. And they'll be going into USC. I'm like, oh, yeah, Utah's going to get them this time.
You
Utah's
get sucked in, yeah. You get sucked in.
And then they go in and USC just blows them out, right? So I am cutting back on my Utah favoritism, especially in that SC game. But I want to wait to see what they do. They can be really good. Defense can carry you. You got to see how that offense comes together for them.
Yeah, with those transfers in, I'd say they're a dark horse for the Pac-12 South. I wouldn't put them in the lead, but they definitely have a chance with good D and some potential good pieces added to the mix on offense.
No doubt. So, all right, now let's move down. So we've kind of covered our outliers here in the Pac-12 South. Now let's head down to Arizona again. And the reason I wanted to save Arizona State for kind of the center of our Pac-12 South is quite honestly, it has been a tumultuous offseason down in Phoenix.
Yeah, to say the least.
They come back on paper and they're really talented. They have, Jaden Daniels, who is a really good quarterback physically. I see all these people throwing love on him. And as a quarterback, I think he's got all the tools in the world. I still haven't seen the consistent decision-making that he needs at that position to be talked about in that vein, where he's one of these elite top-level quarterbacks. Coaches will always love him just for his talent, but I still need to see him making reads, making decisions. He can throw the ball accurately. He can drive the ball. He can run. He can do all those things. But I need him to be more consistent in his decision-making.
Don't you think that's a common problem with very mobile quarterbacks, that they know that they can pick up good yards on the ground if things aren't breaking their way right away? They don't see what they want right away.
They're not patient, right? You're not patient in the pocket. If you can run, it's like, oh, read 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I'm out, right? And so he did that a lot as a freshman, which you expect. Last year, it was just a weird year. So I don't know what to expect coming back.
He was still good on the ground, though. He was a major weapon on the ground for him.
Oh, he was over 500 yards last year rushing, right? So here's a guy who is a weapon, right? He's a tool, and it drives D coordinators crazy. I talked about it with Kyle Whittingham. All these defensive coaches, they hate those guys that can run the football. And so I think he obviously adds that piece of it on the offensive side of the ball, but most offensive coordinators want their QB to throw to open guys, let the athletes earn their scholarships downfield. And then when it all breaks down, now I use my feet. Now I make something happen, kind of extending plays and gaining those yards on third down when you need them.
Yeah, for sure.
I need to see him do that. I need to see him become that quarterback before I start giving him the same love that all these guys kind of from the outside picture do. Talk to me about their O-line is projected to be good. Like 2 years ago on film, Arizona State's offensive line was one of the worst I'd ever seen in the Pac-12. Like they were playing, true freshmen. They had some young guys. They had a senior at tackle who was just like, I would just rush him all day long and get the quarterback. And so I can understand why Daniels was scrambling all the time.
Yeah.
He didn't feel super comfortable back there. But the O-line on paper, now those young guys have grown up, right? And that's kind of the whole Herm Edwards thing. All these young guys have grown up. they should be better.
Well, they had a solid year last year, and the offensive numbers bear it out. They were strong in the running game and the passing game, and they opened up good holes for their big running back Richard. He's one of the top returning running backs in the league. So I think that offensive line is a solid piece, but overall the offense is the strength of their game. I mean, I know they gave up some of the least points in the league last year, but I don't honestly know how they did it. Smoke and mirrors, because their passing or their pass defense wasn't great, their run defense wasn't great, but when it came down to keeping teams out of the end zone, kind of like Utah, that's what they did.
Yeah, and it's funny. I watched that opening game against USC when they found a way to lose it in the end, right?
Yeah.
Keaton Slovis found a way to win it, and I was like, oh, same Arizona State, right? It's talented, fast, shifty, twitchy, but consistency, finding a way to put the finishing cap on it. They weren't able to do it in like 3 games last year. And so they need to find a way to be consistent, to finish games. They're bigger, faster, stronger this offseason. Every team goes into the season with that mantra: we're bigger, faster, stronger. Our strength program was better than it's ever been, right? You hear that across the board for everybody. And Arizona State saying the same thing, but they need to be consistent. And that's one of the things that Arizona State kind of has always done, is finding a way to pull, a loss out of the jaws of victory. They find a way to do it in those big games. And it's either dumb penalties or mistakes or turnovers, something all the time. The big one for me, right, we're off the field now for Arizona State, is all of the recruiting violations.
Oh, man.
That went on last year. I mean, these guys, they had Jaden Daniels' mother, according to news reports, buying tickets for recruits to come on campus. and the coaches all knew about it. They were calling them official visits, right, in communiques between each other and in conversations and meetings between each other, when you weren't allowed to have anybody on campus because of COVID.
Crazy. I don't know. We talked about how in the world is the staff still there, and you have to think, number one, it's because the NCAA is pretty toothless, and number two, what in the heck is Arizona State going to do if they have to bail on their whole staff at the very last minute? Talk about a train wreck and transfers out that would inevitably happen. But things have got to get derailed this season. There's just too much bad stuff going on, despite what kind of talent they have there.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, right? You may have talent, you may have speed, you may have all that, but I mean, there's so much controversy around this program. Like, how do you insulate the kids from all of that, especially when kids are more outward now, right? Like back in the day, you could do it because there wasn't social media, there wasn't any of that. But nowadays, like, these kids can read every single news report that comes out, all the conjecture, everything. How long is Herm Edwards going to be there? I mean, with these kind of blatant recruiting violations, I find it hard to believe that a head coach can keep his job nowadays.
Yeah, you have to think that after this season, he's gonna find himself somewhere else.
Yeah, and so this is likely the last season for his quarterback too, right? Jaden Daniels. I don't know if he's going to stay through a coach over, unless something happens, a switch, all that. I think this is the last season for that quarterback as well. All right, moving up. Now we finally make it to the LA Basin, right? We're talking about UCLA. We're talking about USC, traditional Pac-12 powerhouses, and teams that are loaded with talent. Let's start with UCLA, and let's talk about that team. We've already seen them this year. It was versus Hawaii, so it's kind of hard to put a finger on exactly what that means for them. But I thought, as an overall picture, A, they got after the passer. They were really good up front on that defensive line. B, they ran the football. Those two things bode well for a UCLA season.
Yeah, I expect UCLA to have a very good year this year. And I vacillate between picking them and SC to win the Pac-12 South. Charbonnet transferring in from Michigan is absolutely huge for them. They already had a good running game. DTR quarterback, he's kind of a wild card, talented, but he's not particularly consistent. So the passing game was okay, not great. He's good with his legs. But the defense is real
I
strong.
said the other day, as long as you have DTR as your quarterback, you can find a way to snatch a loss out of the jaws of victory. I mean, you just find a way to lose. He is so talented. Like, the kid is so talented. And I have nothing against him. I'd love to see all these quarterbacks succeed. He turns the ball over and he makes those, decisions where, as a coach, you're like, oh, did he really, he reminds me of Jameis Winston at Florida State throwing that ball over his shoulder, right? I've seen DTR make that throw. It's like, what are you going to do when it's clutch time and you have to count on a dude back there and you're just not sure what your trigger guy is going to do? DTR gives you that. Now he gives you some special talent, right? We talked about the thing all defensive coaches hate is that mobile quarterback. Well, DTR is pretty special in the open field, and he's got a big arm, but not particularly accurate. And I think that has to do with decision-making process. And so I just have to imagine that Chip Kelly kind of really honed down this offseason and went through the offense, giving him his reads, his keys, the whole 9 yards, but it didn't even show up in game one. I mean, he wasn't very good versus Hawaii early on. I think at one point he was 2 for 12. And so it's like, it still isn't showing up. This is what, year 4, started as a true freshman. Like, this guy's got to come along eventually.
Yeah. I mean, his athleticism and his talent is tantalizing. I'm just not convinced he's going to make the leap to a top flight quarterback.
Yeah. Now that said, Charbonnet was awesome. Like, he was really, really good at that running back spot. Big back, fast back, twitchy back. Like, he made some holes. He found some holes. Like, I think he is a pretty big weapon at that running back position. Let's talk about wide receiver real quick. And the one guy I love for that UCLA team is Phillips. Like, this guy finds a way to get open, finds a way to catch the ball. He's been kind of a star for them in hiding.
Yeah, he's their top returning guy, and he's definitely the guy who makes the passing game go. And interestingly enough, former Cal recruit Casimir Allen, who's a shifty running back, was their second leading receiver. He's definitely a weapon out of the backfield in the passing game. He's shown flashes as a running back too, but I think balls in the flat for him or sending him downfield on wheel routes and other things are a real effective weapon with his speed and his athleticism.
Well, and Chip Kelly loves throwing to running backs and tight ends, right? So
yeah.
Last year, the receivers only accounted for like 51% of total yards. The running backs and tight ends got the rest of it. Dulcich at that tight end position caught like 526 yards of passing yards in a shortened season last year. And then running backs, obviously, used Demetric Felton, who was a star player for them. So you have to come back and find some guys, some ways to get the ball out. But if your quarterback is not throwing it downfield too, you really got to find those underneath guys. I think Chip Kelly's going to keep relying on tight ends, running backs to catch the ball.
Yeah, that's his game. I don't see him really changing from that too much.
A huge piece of it now, all of their offensive line, 5 of 5 starters return for this team. So you're talking about a team who offensively has the entire intact. And you know how I feel about offensive line, right? Those guys are the guys that kind of make it happen. They set the tone. They create the culture on a team. They have those 5 guys back, pretty solid. Senior quarterback, we talked about him. They're going to have a really good running game, I think. They just have to find a way to distribute the ball, get it to their athletes. Defensively, I think they're really good up front. I think that Hawaii game showed you that against an inferior opponent, they could kind of handle that line of scrimmage. And so I think they're really good up front of that defensive line. Linebackers, they have athletes, right? That's the position where they kind of need to grow on defense, but they're really solid in their secondary shell too. So they've got 3 returning starters at safety, including, the guy who's their nickel back / Sam, nickel Sam. So they've got some dudes who can play the position at safety. They've got corners. 4 out of 5 returning guys in that rotation at corner are all seniors. The one guy who's starting is a 6'3" freshman. So they're going to be pretty good on the back end too.
Yeah, they do have a lot of returning talent. They did give up a decent amount of yards, but not a ton of points. I
274 yards a game through the air. I mean, that's a lot of yards through the air. They're gonna have to make that up, but I think that D line changes that, right?
Yeah, the front 7 is big.
Yeah, those guys getting after the passer, disrupting passing lanes, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's their bread and butter on defense for sure.
All right, so now finally the dreaded Trojans, right? Let's talk about the Trojans. I want to get your take before I started on the Trojans. Give me your take on USC.
Everybody always goes to SC as the default for the Pac-12 South pick, and I wanted to try and avoid that this year. I mean, they didn't live up to their potential yet again last year. They have tons of talent, but with a quarterback like Slovis back, they could be good on offense. They brought back London and McCoy at receiver, so that's big. They did lose their top receiver, St. Brown, Vaughn's too. Is their defensive line pretty veteran? Our offensive line? Are they bringing back a lot of the guys?
Oh yeah, offensive line I believe has 4 guys returning as well. So I
So
think
you'd
they're
have
pretty
to think they're
solid.
going to get it done on offense.
Yeah, they're going to get it done. I mean, they got some road graders up there. So you got some dudes who are going to be high round picks on that offensive line. In terms of running back, you've got your returning leading rusher back in Malapai, right? And then you have an incoming transfer. Have to find his name here pretty quick. Keontae Ingram transfers in from Texas,
Yeah,
right?
that's
They
a big
lost
one.
they lost the 2 guys behind Malapai, but they bring in a big guy from Texas. So maybe a 1-2 punch instead of 3 guys across the board will help that USC offense. Usually it's when they have 2 backs. We talked about this the other day. I love 2-back schemes. When you have one guy who's the marquee guy and one guy who's the backup guy or the sub guy, right? Who gives you a spell, but either one of those guys gets it going and that's your guy for the game. And so I think with 2 guys, big time transfer out of Texas coming in, offensive line who's very solid in that air raid system, I think it gives them a real chance on offense. And that's that USC mantra, right? That run the football.
Yeah, and Keaton Kristen didn't play a lot last year, but he showed flashes. He's a guy that Cal wanted to get to. So yeah, I expect them to be pretty solid on offense, and on defense, they're always going to be there. All 3 units are solid. So that's why I have to put USC as a favorite for me in the South, even though I didn't want to. I was thinking about UCLA, thinking about Utah as a dark horse, but SC, I'd have to say, even if they don't completely live up to the hype, I still think they have enough talent to get it done.
Yeah, SC's always got enough talent, right? They've always got enough talent. I love Drake London. Like as a receiver, this guy is a pure football player. He is a huge target. He catches the game winner against Arizona State.
Yeah.
He makes the play. He gets the extra yardage. Like as a quarterback, if you're Keaton Slovis, having Drake London out there gives you like huge confidence. This cat is going to get it done for you. So, hey, I love him. He's a fantastic football player. They're going to have fast guys out there too. They just always have fast guys coming out of Crenshaw, right down the street, guys who can just flat out roll. And then you're going to have a quarterback in Keaton Slovis, who arguably is one of the top in the country this year. And you put him in that air raid system where he doesn't have to process a lot. Now, he's a really smart quarterback. He played for Kurt Warner in high school. He was taught how to understand, read, predict defense by Kurt Warner. And then he comes into a system where they don't ask him to do that stuff. And so you use all that knowledge and all that ability, and you can process kind of at the level that you need to in game. He's had times where he didn't look super clean. That Oregon game last year was awful. Like he was horrible in that game, 3 picks.
Yeah.
But if they can establish that running game and he can do what I expect him to do, I just think I like him as a quarterback. He's a gamer. He's a guy that makes plays. I think they can be really, really good on offense this year.
He's productive and efficient for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Defensively, they got 4 pass rush guys who can get after the football. Big cats across the board. And they get the number 1 recruit in Keontae Ingram in the country this year, right? Think about Kevon Thibodeau type of guy who's a big difference maker. They have that guy coming in as a defensive lineman, as a true freshman. So getting after the passer is going to be huge for them. The question for me with USC, they got the talent across the board on the defense, got the talent across the board on the offense. Clay Helton, right? It's the Helton factor.
Yeah.
He had 10 wins his first 2 seasons, and he's kind of just gone downhill in terms of having institutional control, let's call it. Down at USC, you have to coach that team so much different because you have a team full of prima donnas, right? Guys that were the top recruit, always told how great they were. They were always a star on their team. And so maintaining control of a team like that is tough. And so if you're not the right guy, if you don't have the same mentality, it's tough to do. Clay Helton's a really nice guy, right? He's a super guy. And to put that personality in charge of that kind of group of players makes it tough. And that's why SC, I think, hasn't quite hit that next echelon. Pete Carroll outwardly is a nice guy, but in the locker room, he's a bit of a dick.
Yeah,
so because of that, he kept control of that team.
Yeah, they're full of NOKGs. Cal's got their OKGs, our kind of guys, and they've got a lot of not our kind of guys, but you can't deny the talent there. It's just a matter of harnessing those different personalities and those different egos. Like you said, Carroll was perfect for it. He was happy and smiling to the media, but he was pretty ruthless in the locker room, and he knew exactly how to channel that talent and that athleticism to consistent elite results. But as good as SC's talent is now, and I still think they'll win the Pac-12 South, I still think they'll lose more games than they really should based on what kind of talent they have.
Yeah, I would call them TOKGs, as in their own kind of guy, because it's about me. I've always been the star.
Yeah.
You can't tell me I'm not the star. There's a little bit of entitlement there. So I will say this, SC has talent. I expect Cal to beat them this year on some kind of weird foible in the game. And so I am not going to pick USC as my South guy for two reasons. A, I can't. USC.
Yeah.
That's the start for me. B, I've gotten to see UCLA live, and I think they're pretty good. They're pretty talented. I'm going to pick UCLA for my Pac-12 South, and I'm going to go with potentially Utah as the upsetter. I think Utah, if Kyle can get that defense right and they can run the football, if they can run the football and then Baylor transfer quarterback comes in and plays at a high level, I think that they could be the upsetter, the scrambler in the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, I'll be shocked if those aren't the top three teams in the South. And like I said, I could flip a coin between SC and UCLA. I wouldn't disagree with your choice at all.
No, I totally get it. It's a personal thing for me. I can't pick USC.
I can't pick Stanford in the North at any point either. So
right.
I get it.
Right. No, it's just one of those things. Can't do it. I think Arizona State at some point, all the controversy is going to get to them. They're going to fall apart. It's just the first crack in the dike at Arizona State. I think all that comes gushing out. And
it's got to happen at some point.
As talented as they are, like if they don't win every game and if they don't do it the way the kids want it, right, the athletes want it, I just think the first crack in the dike and that thing comes apart. They have a lot of that SC problem too, right? They get some pretty talented cats down there that are always the stars of their team, and it's a cultural thing down at Arizona State as well. So
yeah,
I just think that's going to be an issue. Jim, appreciate it. So we got Pac-12 North, we got Pac-12 South, we got our Cal preview. We are ready for game week coming out here. You coming on, man, having all that information on the backside, help me out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll kick off in a little over 48 hours. So it's go time.
It is craziness. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Looking forward to Cal, Nevada this weekend. As always, appreciate you guys being here. Don't forget, leave us a comment down below. We'll be answering some of those comments. Talk to us. Let us know what you guys love, what you want. We're here to bring it to you. That's what we're doing, right? We're talking about Cal football, trying to bring you what you want. So if you want something, ask for it. And I appreciate you guys watching. I am Mike Pawlawski, and I will talk to you guys later. As always, go Bears.